Alright, so we got a 2010 Camaro with the V6 that we're going to be changing the AC compressor, the condenser, and the expansion valve. This compressor shelled out. Right now it's completely empty of refrigerant. So I'm going to start, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get all this out of the way. We'll take this cover off and the air box. And we're just going to get this stuff out of the way. And then the air box, yeah, we're going to disconnect it right here at the throttle body. And we'll get this whole air box out of the way. That way we can get down to the compressor. We can get to the, we're going to have to pull the radiator to be able to get to the condenser. But looks like it's going to be a pretty simple job. A lot of people are afraid of the evaporator, or the expansion valve. If you follow those lines right here, let me see if I can follow those lines right there. You can kind of see where they expand. I'll have to probably get the GoPro in there so that you can see that. This camera's going to be too big. I'll try to get the best shot I can. A lot of people, I actually saw a video where a guy pulled the dash to change the expansion valve. You do not have to pull the dash to change an expansion valve. So, and well, I'll show you that. And I'm probably going to bust this video up into sections. That way, you know, if you're tackling this yourself and you only want to see the expansion valve or the compressor, the condenser, whatever, you're not going to have to watch the entire video to see that. It'll probably be in 3 sections. Anyway, let me get the camera set up and we're going to get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just loosen the these 8mm. We're going to keep that one intact. Pull out on the little yellow connector. That's just a safety lock. And there's 2 10mm nuts right here that we're going to disconnect. Or remove, rather. And I think looks like it ate some birds. And that should have opened up. We can get to the tensioner real easy to loosen the belt off. Compressor's right there. And so what my plan is for the radiator, I'm going to use some pinch off pliers to pinch off the hoses. Then we'll disconnect the hoses here at the radiator and pull the radiator out. Put that connector up out of the way. Yeah. Looks like the condenser has a line right there. I've got some kind of aftermarket wire, it looks like, right here. And that line will be off. You can see the connector, the tube down there. connects to the lower part of the condenser. And I believe, yeah, there is some, I don't know if that's power steering cooling or oil cooling or transmission cooling that goes into the bottom of the condenser. Probably transmission. Anyway, let's start taking this thing apart. I guess the first thing we want to do is get to the tensioner. We're going to take the belt off. I'm going to try to just pull the belt off of the compressor, probably the power steering pump too. Lay it off to the side. Okay, I've just got a ratchet in the tensioner. Where do I want to do this? And like I said, the system's already empty on this car, so the condenser is leaking. So anytime you replace a shelled out compressor anyway, you want to replace the condenser. It's a good idea to replace the condenser. Otherwise, because there can be the possibility of shelled out compressor components hung up in the condenser, and if you put just a new compressor on, that stuff can break loose and take out your new compressor. So let me see what my next part of attack needs to be. Actually, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to use pinch-off pliers down here on the radiator hoses, but I'm going to disconnect them here at the engine. I'll get a bucket and catch as much of the coolant as I can, and we'll keep as much fluid, as much coolant in the radiator as possible. I'm just going to disconnect the hose here at the radiator. Okay, there's a connector right here that you got to get. That's for the cooling fans. And I'm going to try to keep the cooling fans attached to the radiator. Need a 10 millimeter. Okay, since the condenser is bolted to the radiator, I'm going to unbolt these top bolts for the condenser to the radiator portion. And I think at that point, I think the radiator will come on up out of here. I've got to leave the condenser in for now because there's lines up to the bottom of it that we got to disconnect. And we've still got to disconnect the AC line going to the condenser. So this is just 13 millimeter. You can get it with a regular wrench, but I've got a swivel head gear wrench. Think. Okay, the condenser goes down into some bosses on the radiator. So I'm going to pull the condenser up a little bit and see if I can. There we go. Okay, radiator and cooling fans all came out as an assembly. Now we'll get the condenser. And the condenser is just being held in there right now by the lines and the cooling lines attached to the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to disconnect the lines from the condenser. Got a 13 millimeter and a little extension. And there goes the nut. Try not to do that. Okay, so that line's disconnected. The lower line, I'm getting on it with a swivel 13 millimeter. Okay, so that lower line's off. There's two cooling lines, I believe for power steering. Yeah. So we're going to go after those next. do have a bucket. I'm just using a pair of these. If you don't have a pair of these, you need to get you a pair, because they will definitely save you a bunch of headache. A pair of these too helps. That's the line that we was trying to get. I'm going to let it drain in the bucket. Okay, so now we're going after the compressor. The first thing I think I want to do is disconnect this connector. See if I can get it out of the way. Shove it up there. 13mm bolt for the manifold. Might be able to get on it just for the deep socket. And then there is a bolt down here on the bottom, and then nut right here, and then there's a bolt in the back. There's that top nut. We'll see if we can get the top nut off. Top nut. I'm going to try to get the aft bolt. I'm just using a deep well and a, actually deep well is too deep. Go back on the socket. Shallow. So only one left is that bottom one. I mean, I can see it. It's not that difficult. I just want to, I would like to be able to use an air tool, but I may not be able to. spin it out with the air ratchet. Air ratchet wasn't able to really get on it real good. Still may not be able to. Long-winded. Alright, so the compressor should be ready to come off. Okay, we got a power steering line in the way, so we're going to have to break that loose. No big deal, but probably going to make a little bit of a mess. This is the kind of stupid stuff that I wish they would keep this kind of stuff in mind. Got a harness you got to move out of the way. Do not tell me this thing will come out of here. Well, that upper stud looks like it has to actually come out. So let me get a socket. Definitely want to go with a 6-point socket. There is a little hex on the end. Hopefully that stud's not just so tight that it's not going to want to come out. Otherwise we'll have to get clamp some vice grips on it or something. Okay, so that stud looks like it's a 5mm. Just going to try to get on it with this ratchet right here. Well, I thought I got lucky. If you pull the compressor as far back as you can see quite a bit of that stud. So that compressor is pulled back quite a ways, and you can see that stud right there. So I'm just going to clamp onto that with some vice grips, and I'm going to pull that, pull that stud out of the way. Okay, so I've just got a pair of vice grips locked on down here onto that stud. Now I worked it back and forth, and it's now loose. So now, if I can get my vice grips off here, I'm going to try to get on it with the socket. Alright. And there's the compressor. Before I install the compressor, I'm going to disconnect this line here, and I'm going to blow all the hoses out just to make sure that there's no... The compressor wasn't completely shelled out. It was actually working somewhat, but just to be on the safe side, I want to make sure there's no shrapnel or metal shavings or anything in the lines. So to get that off, what do we got here? 13. And if I blow through this, it should blow it all the way through the evaporator and out the line down here in the bottom. To use nitrogen or something like that, but we're going to just use air. Of course, we'll evacuate it for a good 30 to 45 minutes and then charge it up. Okay, so that's all the lines. Let's go ahead and get this compressor into place. Now, obviously, you've got to throw that stud in the compressor and get the stud started. But that's what you got to do. So I got the stud in place. Now this is obviously going to be probably the toughest part of the job, because you got to get it lined up and get the stud started. Not even close. I think I got it. Alright, studs installed. Okay, everything started. Sorry about that. Alright, the compressor's done. Get our transmission line hooked back up. May as well disconnect the if you disconnect the transmission line, you can get to the bolt, that bottom bolt, a lot easier. So just go ahead and disconnect this, not transmission, but power steering. So disconnect that first, and that lower line you can get an air tool on it. If I can remember how it went. It's always a good idea to take a picture before you take things apart. I think that's right, but I'm going to have to, you know, that can't be right. I just don't think there's enough belt going around the compressor pulley. So let me double check on that. Alright, that is correct. It just doesn't seem like there's enough belt to drive this compressor. But, hey, they're the engineers. I guess if they say that that's enough, then who am I to question it? Alright, compressor's in, belt's installed. I think at this point we're going to go after the expansion valve. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and remove this upper insulator shroud, just so that we can have as much room as possible. thing, we'll go ahead and remove this hose. Again, just so it's out of the way. And this is just the vacuum hose for the brakes. Now you don't necessarily have to take this foam off, but I'm going to, so that you guys can see better, and it'll help give me a little bit more visibility also. Now the expansion valve, let me see if I can get you guys a good shot of this. If you look right there where that nut is, that nut comes off. Once that manifold's off, there's going to be two probably Allen heads, and then that expansion valve will pull out. And obviously you can tell by how tight it is that I'm probably not going to be able to get a good picture for you, but you got an idea of where it's at. And with that, and the fact that I am going to try to get you in a position to where you can kind of see what's going on. Looks like a 13 millimeter, and I'm going to get on it with a long extension and a 1/4 inch ratchet. And one more little tip that I'm going to do. This is the high side line going to the expansion valve. I'm going to unclip it so that that line can be pulled back. There's two clips that you're going to want to unclip off that. Let me get you back up here. Okay, they're Torx. So I'm going to get some Torx and get the tool lined up, and we'll be back. Okay, so what that is it's a Torx Plus 20. A regular Torx will probably work, but Torx Plus is a better fit. I put a part number to a good kit that It's got pretty much everything you'll ever need as far as torques. Jeez. Expansion valve's not getting changed on this. That bottom bolt is just way too tight, and I'm not going to risk trying to drill it out. So we're going to have to hope that the expansion valve is fine. But if your expansion valve is bad and you've troubleshot it, this is what it looks like. So you've got two bolts. Let me zoom out a little bit. You've got two bolts right here. They're Torx 20. There's a stud right here for that manifold to slide on. Then you got a nut that tightens up so it'll seal off. And we're going to put new seals on it. But this bottom Torx it was just way too tight, and it's not coming out. I would love to be able to put this on, but it's not worth the risk of trying to extract that bolt and damaging it to the point to where it's just going to be a nightmare. As long as the expansion valve is still good, then this AC will still work fine. But this is what you'd be looking at if you wanted to change it. And if you want to give yours a shot, worst case scenario, same thing happens that just happened to me, and you don't get it out. The upper bolt, it actually loosened off the way it should. That bottom one, way too tight. I tried going both ways to break it loose, and it just didn't go. So we're going to have to just go with what we got. So at this point, we've got a new bag of hardware. Not hardware, but we got a new bag of seals that we're going to want to put on here. You always want to lube up the seals too. And this compressor is pre-filled with oil. So you do want to make sure that you've got oil in your compressor. Okay, I'm hooking up the lines. I think I've got those off. The manifold to the compressor lines is specifically what I was talking about. And before I do that, I think it's going to be easier to connect this connector right now. Alrighty. All that looks good. So now, you know what I need to do? I need to get these vacuum lines hooked up for the brake booster. So you've got these transmission lines. Actually, I think they were power steering lines that hook up right here. And they're just held with those clamps. Got one on each side. And that's what I'm getting ready to do now. So, other than just getting the clamp on, I've got to stick that one on a little bit more and then slide the clamp up. But I just wanted to show you that so that you have a better understanding of what's going on down there. Make sure you take your rubber plugs out before you attempt to hook the lines up. I had to remove the stud from the original condenser. This new one did not come with a stud installed. Just getting this old seal off the lower hose. Remember, always lube up your seals. Pull your plug out. Okay, the condenser's installed. Now all we got to do just removing anything that might get in my way. So if you look at the condenser, you got these little feet, or not feet, but these posts right here. Those actually go down into these slots right here on the back of the radiator. So the radiator goes in. The radiator's got these little pads right here, these round, they're probably about 1.5 inches in diameter. They will fit right there in those holes. And then you've got to lift up on the condenser and be able to fit the condenser into here. So that's the trick to all that noise. And then if you're lucky, the aftermarket condenser is going to actually line up and where these ears are. See how they're slotted here on the original? I don't know if they are on the Yeah, it looks like they are on the new one. So that's going to be the deal. I'm going to slide this down in where it belongs, and then lift up on the condenser and try to drop it down into those holes. Then we'll bolt everything up and then start connecting hoses. Just to give you a shot down here of what this looks like. Okay, I removed that line just to give me more room for the radiator to drop down. So keep this top line disconnected until you get the radiator in. Okay, the feet of the radiator are in, and the condenser is in its little spot. Dropped one of my bolts. So the radiator and condenser is all mounted up. Both the bolts are in. Just still got to hook this line up. You know, those lines don't get tightened a whole lot. Those washer with the built-in seal smashes down on the washer and gives the seal the proper amount of squeeze. I guess both these are exactly the same. And if you're not familiar with this particular style clamp, so if you look at this clamp, that clamp is actually locked open with this little tab. And all you got to do is get in there with like a screwdriver, give it a little bit of a helping hand. This screwdriver might be a little big, but there we go. Hopefully you was able to see that, but that clamp is now released to where it needs to be. Now some of them will be like that and some of them won't. Like this bottom one, for some reason GM didn't use that style clamp. Don't know why. This is just the coolant overflow. And where did it go? Isn't it right here? Alright, I think we're actually all hooked up. Double check all these hoses. That's going to go to the air box. Yeah, I think we're ready for the air box. So we got this connector. This is what runs your fans. So make sure you get that hooked up. You'll know pretty quick if you don't, because your vehicle's going to overheat. Okay, I think that's it. Let's get this air box put in. Got a stud. Want to make sure that that finds its place down there. then we're going to charge it up. Alright, going to get the vacuum pump hooked up and start pulling a vacuum. Got the vacuum pump going. She's coming on down, got both valves open, got it all hooked up to the car. And this is the perfect time to start cleaning your mess up. So that's what I'm going to do. Start cleaning up all this stuff, getting rid of what I don't need. And whenever we come back, we're going to charge it up. Okay, I just shut the compressor off, or the vacuum pump I mean. And we're going to just sit here for about 10 or so minutes, make sure that the vacuum does not move. And as of right now, it's not. Valves are still open. Actually, I guess I can shut those just to make sure that it's not this hose here. If this hose here was leaking and these valves was open, then it would drop. With these valves shut, you've isolated the high side and low side in the car. So I'm just going to wait for a little bit. As long as it's holding tight, we'll throw some refrigerant in it. Needs 1.32 pounds of refrigerant. The cans are 12-ounce cans. So I'll do a little math. We'll figure out exactly how much. This can's probably about half full, and then we'll press on. And it looks like we might be getting some rain here before too long, so I finished this just in time. I had to add power steering fluid, of course. You know, lost whenever we disconnected those power steering hoses down below. Lost quite a bit of it. The coolant, I just poured the coolant. The coolant was still in really good shape, and I poured the coolant back in here. I'll check, and if it needs more, I'll add more. I'm going to go ahead and throw this cover on, and then when I turn the camera back on, we're going to be adding refrigerant. Okay, it's been about 10-15 minutes. Still has the same amount of vacuum in it, so I'm going to go ahead and disconnect down here. I'm going to connect right here. Turn that can on, I'm going to just bleed it. And start charging. 21 ounces is what 1.32 pounds equates to. I've already added oil. I put the required amount of oil in also. And what I like to do, I'm just going to let this can, I like to at least let one can go in without starting the engine. So we're just going to wait for that can to go in. You can see the high sides just slowly coming up. In fact, while you're doing this without the engine running, you can go ahead and go in both sides. If you hold the can, normally I hold it with both hands. If you warm the can up just a little bit, it'll go in quicker. Okay, I hope you're going to be able to see these gauges. I'm going to start the vehicle, and we're going to finish charging the system. This can is pretty much gone. We got one more can to go. changing cans. This can's pretty much gone. That should put us right about where we need to be. And the pressures are looking really good. 200 pounds on the high side. We got about 36, 37 on the low side. And I can feel this low side line is nice and cold. So let's get us a thermometer. Let's get in the vehicle. And we'll see what the temp is. Right now we're showing about 80, I don't know, 82 roughly outside. Roll these windows up. So I got the idle bumped up just to, I don't know, about 1200 RPM. We're showing about 50 and it's still dropping. It's about 45. If you can get 40 to 45 degree air sitting still, that's doing pretty good. We're coming down on 40. We're just a hair above 40. Feeling nice and cold. We just hit 40. And it looks like it's actually slightly, it's below 40. 39, 38, 39. It doesn't get any colder than that, guys. With a 134 system, that's pretty much what you can expect. There's about 38, 37. So this is this car's fixed. Luckily, that expansion valve seems to be fine, and that's definitely a good thing. And to be honest, that's a factory expansion valve, so it may actually be better than that aftermarket expansion valve that I would have ended up putting in if that bottom bolt wouldn't have stripped on me. So yeah, we got about 37, 38 degree air, so that's pretty darn good. Anyway, I think that's probably about it. If you don't know how much coolant you're going to lose, so you're going to need to check that. I'm going to let the engine get completely to operating temperature. Those are perfect pressures. We got about 25 on the low side and about 180 on the high side at idle. Anyway, make sure you get everything hooked back up. I guess that's about it for this video. Anyway, hopefully you guys got some tips out of this. If you're going to do your own AC on your Camaro, this pretty much should have covered about everything that you're going to have to tackle. Again, the expansion valve, wish I would have been able to show you guys how easy it is to change that. But on this particular car, that lower bolt was so tight. I don't know if they actually ended up using Loctite on this or not, but even that top bolt, I had to work it back and forth, and then it finally broke loose. The bottom bolt, I tried doing the same thing, and it finally, the torques finally stripped in it. So I wasn't about to start trying to drill it out. If you troubleshoot your system and it's down to the expansion valve, then just be aware that GM really should have come up with a better, I don't know what to say. They should have put something on the bolts to make sure that it doesn't seize up in that aluminum the way it did. Anyway, I'm done. This car's looking good, so I'm out. You guys take care. We'll see you in the next one.